interesting. We're used to clapping at the end of great films, but it's a strange feeling to be clapping at the end of this film, right? We've got a wonderful psychiatric service dog here who's just giving me a look like, what are we doing here? Cooper is totally on top of taking care of you here. I am so grateful to John and Kiko for having created this space for us to be together to watch a film like this. This film places us in history in terms of the danger that journalists are facing at this moment in history. What I love about what this film does is allows us to feel really deeply how many people in the world have to struggle with the pain of violence. And this film does not pull any punches. We're with people and seeing them as people going through the worst thing that they could never imagine, but that just happens to be happening. So I just really want to first start with acknowledging what lucidity and clarity of purpose you had in making this film, because everything that we watched was about people coping with how hard this world is. And it has a great tenderness in it, this film, that was obviously coming from the way the camera was held, right? And of course, this, incredible person in Somalia who says to Brent, like, I see you. I see how you are holding the camera, and gives him love back in that moment, even as his body is so damaged, is one of those remarkable moments. I'm also struck by the older man in the Ukraine who manages to say, curse the Russian government, not the Russian people, even as his house has been destroyed. People are really quite something. And I think you all are quite something, that you were able to make something out of all these years of living and documenting. And I think we all in this room really believe in this craft and what it gives us. So I just want to acknowledge your human emotional courage, what you have crafted to honor Brent with love and respect for the work that we all care about and work so hard for. You started somehow, you lived through this, you're living through this, and you didn't stop filming because you knew that was the way that Brent approached what he was doing. So I guess it starts at that moment when both of you are shot. And obviously, you didn't stop in that moment.
Right. So I think that came, I remember, you see the image that I'm being taken on a stretcher to over the bridge. That moment I faint. I don't remember other than waking up in the ambulance and calling Craig. So the first thing I was to call him. And we weren't sure if I knew he was going to at some point come, hopefully for me and Brent, but we just didn't know. And so I do remember asking that to take my phone away from me. And I started recording myself whenever I was up and conscious. But I think also recording our voices, recording what we were seeing. So I think for me on my end, I just never stopped doing what I know how to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you on your end, had you been filming yourself in the conversations that you had been having with them before that moment?
No, I mean, I was working behind the scenes with Juan and Brent on this project. And so I think I got a text from Brent maybe, 45 minutes before they were shot, just saying we've arrived to Irpin. And, it was probably 5 a.m. in Austin, and I just texted back, be careful. Fell asleep and then woke up to a phone call from Juan, which I just instantly thought, this can't be good. Why is Juan calling? Yeah, and then the next couple of hours, we're just, trying to confirm that Brent was actually dead, because I did not want to call my mother and my sister and say that news if I wasn't 100% sure. So just trying to get in touch with everybody from the team. And Juan and Brent had separated from the team because that bridge was down, so they had decided to go on foot. So the driver and the translator was not with them. So I waited till the translator could get to where they brought Brent's body. They confirmed that he was gone. And then before I could even wake my sister and mom up, it hit world news, because the images of Brent started hitting the news. So fortunately, nobody got a hold of them before me, and I was able to tell them before. But, they woke up to this being all over the news. And then, I don't know, I kept thinking about, I think it was in Iraq, Brent and I had talked about the what ifs, and just, always made that promise that if something was to happen, we would keep filming, and we wouldn't leave the other person behind. And I just kept remembering that conversation. I remember packing my bag and seeing my camera to the left and my clothes to the right, and just clearly hearing Brent's voice, like, of course you're going to take your camera. And then just got on a plane, and it was Ukrainian journalists that helped me get him out. If it wasn't for journalists in Ukraine meeting me at the border, and they dropped everything that they were doing for a week to just focus on navigating, getting Brent's body out and getting Juan, safely out as well. And yeah, just started filming it. It was all I really knew to do in that moment, was just to keep filming.
John, I can only imagine that you have had many conversations with these two over the years.
When Brent and Craig embedded with the Arkansas National Guard, they did something that I don't think anybody has done before. From the moment the knock on the door came from the government, you have to go to war, to the day they came back, they were with the Arkansas National Guard. And the deployment, I don't think it was supposed to be as long as it was. So they kept getting extended, and I think they were there for at least a year and a half, and so they were in constant danger for a year and a half. It's harder than, to some degree, going there yourself. And people who've been in war zones, we know the ones that actually don't go and stay on the hotel balcony. And then we know the rest who would sort of like gnaw their arm off if it was in a bear trap to be able to get to the front, because that has become an ingrained responsibility of war reporters to communicate what the war is like, and you got to be at the front. But you had an opportunity to pay tribute to somebody who was important to you before they died, and you were conscious enough and loved that person enough to be able to do that. And they had to catch up and to be able to piece together the tribute. And that was really, really hard for them. And it wasn't fun because Brent was already dead.
John, that experience of being the one left behind after spending that much time thinking and worrying about these two in Iraq, you all went through something together in a way, right?
There's a funny story about Brent. We were going from Pakistan into Afghanistan right at the beginning when the United States invaded. And Brent was part of our team. Brent had his act together all the time out in the field, but sometimes in other places he didn't. He had misplaced his passport. And the window to get into Afghanistan was closing that day. He didn't have his passport, and he got left behind. And it was that road that's on the most dangerous roads in the world, and they were trying to kill us when we went across the border. And all of a sudden we look up, and Brent's running down the road with his passport. We don't know how he got it. He retraced his steps. He commandeered it, and his desire was something that you can't imagine. But if you're talking about survivor's guilt, Juan has been discussing this over the past couple of days. It's just seared everyone's soul. You're talking about this is very, very, because the consistent trauma, and especially when you're making the film, Kirsten, you know what goes on in the editing room.
We learn about the pain of this world little by little. And those of us who have filmed many places and seen a lot of people's pain, it grows and grows and grows in us, the magnitude of the pain. But the pleasure of seeing again a person who delighted you, like that man who said, I see the way you hold the camera, even in the midst of all of it. You're like, this person, yes. You were back in the aliveness of Brent, right? You were back in the aliveness of the people that you had filmed. And you were seeing the relationships that he had with the people he filmed. I think cinema helps us cope with the most traumatic and painful things in life.
So there's a couple parts to this. First, I don't watch the beginning of the film anymore because there's that image that you see, the photograph of Brent taken by the soldier. That triggers still, and that's the last image that I had of Brent when I left him. I helped the driver who were taking us in the moment. I helped take Brent's body out, laid it on the ground. I was already bleeding, fainting, and he helped me put it with the other driver into a car. And at that moment, that was the last thing I remember of Brent. So, and I'm now making an effort not to remember him in that light or that way.
When you say that it triggers you, does it transport you back to the moment?
Yeah.
Is that what happens?
Yes, there's a couple of things. So one is the guilt that you feel, the survival guilt. Not only of leaving his body behind, but what could I have done differently that day? Maybe I could have convinced him not to go to the front to look for this footage. Maybe talk to him and say, it's not worth it. It's too much work. I went back a year later, and I met with the driver who was taking us that day, and we did the same route to Kiev, and we sort of were comparing notes. And that was very healing for me because I understood that Brent was not alone, that driver was with him the entire time, that the troops came and evacuated them, because he lost his camera, his money, his IDs, and we were wondering, like, someone mugged the body of Brent. Like, you just have all these questions.
It was, of course, very hard to keep looking at that, but I really felt like, yeah, Brent is alive while I'm working on this, because one minute you're editing a scene and he's dead, and then the next minute you cut to the next scene and he's very much alive again. And so, and I felt like I could really hear him in the edit room. I felt like he was very present. Juan would come down and spend months at the house and we would work on this together. But there's part of me that almost, worried about this film being completely done, because now I have to figure out new ways to keep him, alive, where, that for 3 years, it was very much having him alive. And like you said, all these characters alive that interacted with him. And I did watch your film early in this process, and it really did give me the thought of like, oh, I didn't think about finding Brent's voice the way that you did, so that really helped too, of like, because, we weren't on camera hardly at all. And just going back and digging for those moments, and, like that moment with the man in the hospital in Somalia, it's not something, you ever would have probably even noticed on the first round or so, but just going and really, really digging for those voices.
And it's so barely there, because it's not what we're supposed to be doing, or we turn the camera off when we're actually interacting with people. But, I'm just going back to that way that kid in Haiti was looking at Brent. And over and over you saw him seeing children, seeing little boys with some level of like, I get you, right? And that just comes through the footage. The way you can almost see it like a mirror. You see him seeing them and them being seen in his eyes. Juan, I just want to say, as sorry that Brent is not here, we are very glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very glad you're here. is important. It's like it's this work of healing and the sort of almost, it becomes a generation. I'm, a child of someone who made a mistake and someone got killed. And that plays for a whole generation. If only I had stopped, if I hadn't turned left. And, I think probably every person in that film that we saw who lost someone they loved is going to spend the rest of their lives saying, if I hadn't turned here, if I hadn't turned there. But part of what you have made is teaching us is that this is what humans must face, is the death of those we love most. And also what we must face in moments of political violence is how do we bear witness to what is happening. And I think this film does this with such integrity and such commitment. And there's so many ways that powerful forces would love to keep us from seeing these things, right? There are many ways that we see things in this film that we never get to see. Sealing his coffin, right? It's like, I've never seen that before, right? That we are experiencing, this is what people go through, this is what it takes. And these things get hidden from us so we can pretend to ourselves that damage isn't being done at the scale that it is.
This is really for John. Evolutionarily, you knew Brett, and I'm presuming Chris as young men, as people getting moving. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution and the various turns in the road taken and not taken?
Their desire, their compassion, and the way they wanted to do the right thing made me very, very comfortable in saying, come on, this is a wonderful horse to ride on for your life. It's going to take you places where you never imagined you were going to go. You're going to see things of horror. You're going to see things of wonder, but you're going to be able to make a difference in the world if you do it the right way. And they did. And Brent did this better than anybody else. You can see when he's talking to that little kid, they got the police all around, they got the gangs trying to kill them, and he's looking at the kid and he's holding the camera like this in a way that there is a direct connection between him and whoever he's filming. And to be able to go around the world and do that, what would you have rather done? You have anything else you would have rather done? And you, anything else you want to do? How about you, Kirsten? Anything else you want to do? No.
It's a question for Craig and Juan. Are you still going out into the field?
I do. I've been covering a lot of immigration stories in Latin America here and also in the U.S. There's a lot of gigs that come, sometimes good perks of coming and going and shooting for abroad. So just had a 5-country trip. So I do still shoot a lot. Mostly stills, but these days we're also producing another documentary series, so I still do. I still got the bug of going out of these areas as well. I think for me is the story and the people that you meet. I don't have responsibilities other than to myself, so that gives me somewhat freedom to say this now, and maybe those things will change in years to come, but yes, I still go out.
He had not even had his final surgery to get his colostomy bag removed and was already back in Colombia in the field filming. That's how quickly he wanted to get back out in the field. Yeah, I'm still going to keep making documentaries. I will take a break from this. Just just it's too much for my family to do that right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this film, and thank you for sharing so much of yourselves, with folks who may not necessarily be able to see this too often. You had mentioned in the film that, journalism is becoming one of the most dangerous occupations, and, we're seeing this every day with journalists being targeted in all these different conflicts that are happening. What are some ways that folks, especially folks who are not in the industry, how can people help support journalists? How can we put pressure on our governments to protect them? What can the average person do?
As you can see, to do this sort of reporting requires not only courage, talent, but also requires resources. And there are less and less places that are willing to invest in this kind of reporting. I think part of what the film, I hope, comes across is this is a loss for someone here in the U.S. We tend to think that this only happens to foreign correspondents. Obviously, in the last month, there have been too many deaths, unnecessary deaths, and we have to protect journalists. We're civilians. We're not taking sides, and but we think that here in the U.S., particularly, I think people think that only happens abroad. But Brent was from here, and so I think the message is keep supporting journalism, keep supporting and inform yourself well, organize. There's elections coming up. We're starting to see the threat against freedom of speech, against journalism here in this country. So what we would go out and document abroad, banana republics, is starting to turn a little bit the tide to this place. So I think hopefully people are conscious of that, and that's what we do.
You know, you can never forget when you're in a place for real with the camera that you're there. And then when you look back at footage, you see the evidence that you were there. But I would, I would say to each of us in this room tonight, we're here at this moment in history. And we are starting to understand the ways in which powerful systems are targeting individuals who dare speak. And we are all going to have to think really deeply about how we navigate this, because part of why Brent and Craig survived for 20 years doing this work, part of why John has survived for a lifetime of doing this work, part of why you are alive, and to your credit, and right, is that you're thinking all the time, as well as being drawn in, as well as being emotional. You're thinking strategically, thinking about your own safety and other people's safety. And I want to give you credit for how much you were thinking, even as you were feeling and doing, right? And I think that is what this time is going to demand of us, that we all think very carefully and strategically about what we do and what we say and how we do it and how we say it. So let us take courage from Brent and from all three of you here tonight, and think and feel with our hearts and minds. So thank you all for being here, and let us go eat and laugh and move forward together.